to the wellness webinar. Here we go. Stream starting soon.
Hold on.
I never know where to go.
Just wait a minute. He'll tell you.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, look at this. That's fun.
Hey, that was super fancy with the countdown. Look at that. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our wellness webinar. Joining me today, I'm Elaine Pauly. Joining me today is the wonderful Pat Ziemer and the excellent Dr. Myers. And we are going to be talking about all things wellness. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hey, hi.
Hi. So, Dr. Myers, where are you today? And first of all, let me say, if you have a question, put it in the comment box. We are going to talk about the coronavirus, obviously, but we're also going to, take other questions that you may have. Dr. Myers is our medical director for MagnaWave, so she does understand PMF and can answer really, if you have a question that she can answer about PMF and wellness, she'd be happy to take that. But we're going to kick it off with, the current wellness crisis. But where are you right now, Dr. Myers?
Right now, I'm back in Tampa, Florida, working in the hospital system here again. So I've just been toggling really between here and Ohio for the most part over the last month or two while we've been working with COVID.
And so you're changing shifts, you said earlier. So you go from like day to night shift. How does that work? You go in.
Right. We work in this facility 12-hour shifts. So like yesterday, I worked 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Today, I will work 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So it's kind of a game, how to shift your sleeping pattern where you can sleep in the day and work all night. It can be tricky sometimes.
Yeah, that's crazy. I appreciate you being on here with us. So, Dad, I think we talked about this a little bit the other day, and I think this is as a mother, this is the first question I want to talk about is they've had 5 deaths as of yesterday. I haven't checked today in New York City from children that had COVID-19, recovered, but then got sick. And they are calling it inflammation around the heart. I didn't get to learn. I don't understand exactly what's happening. Have you heard anything of this? You do work with children. So tell me what you know about this and how that's, playing out.
So this is a new finding that we're seeing, a new repercussion, I guess, of COVID. And again, we're learning things weekly. This novel virus is showing us new tricks and things that are occurring and changing and shifting in it. It seems almost on a weekly level. And right now, what we thought was a relatively benign process in the pediatric population, the younger crowd, is changing. We're seeing in Europe and in the hot spots, the high incidence population areas where we've seen lots of positive COVID cases, the children are now showing us inflammation in their vessels, in their blood vessels is really what this is. And it's hard for us to guess. We do see this kind of a pattern in the springtime and in the fall. And it's a common pathway from multiple different viruses that can end up irritating the blood vessel surfaces. And because that occurs, the blood vessels weaken, and then they will actually balloon like an aneurysm does, and they can actually rupture or burst open at times. And so, the key finding that we're seeing that's concerning is that the area of most impact are the blood vessels of the heart itself. So it's like having a heart attack as an 8-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old is really what happens. And so we, in the spring, see this patterning frequently, and we call it Kawasaki's disease. And it's a cluster of things that happen that are kind of that end patterning of multiple different viruses. So there's not a single specific thing that will cause what we call Kawasaki's disease that we have found to date. What we're finding is it's a pathway of irritation, inflammation of vascular structures. And it appears that COVID, as a coronavirus, does this same thing. So the question for us is this really that sort of normal springtime patterning, and it's just being exacerbated because we have such a high incidence of this coronavirus, or is it really just that this virus will do this?
Yeah.
We just don't know yet, and that's the problem. But we're seeing it here in the United States, most specifically in New York, but we also have a case report from Europe in London where they're seeing it there as well. So, and a lot of the kids are testing PCR positive, but some of them are testing that nasal swab PCR negative, but we're finding that they're creating antibodies in their serum. So it's a blood test and the nose test that's telling us that they've been exposed to the virus itself.
Yeah, because you don't know. They say with children it's really hard. You don't know if your kids have been exposed, and then so I mean, for me, that's frightening for parents. Like, how do you deal with that? I mean, I've just been MagnaWaving my kids every day, regardless. It used to be okay, we're gonna do this every other day. This is like, sit down, MagnaWaving your body and pulling out as much inflammation, because I don't know if you've been sick. And a lot of times, especially in the younger kids, there's no signs or symptoms. And then something like this could pop up that scares parents. So I think having the most information, and, again, a good offense is a good defense. So, or a good defense is a good offense.
And I think that's the key, right? If you can stay healthier in your system, if you can eliminate some of the irritation or inflammation or the building of that, because this isn't a speeding train that occurs. This is a slow build into a big problem. So if you can change the steps along the way that create this massive overwhelm of the vascular system, then you can likely avoid that type of a reaction or response from the body itself. So, staying, again, as healthy as you can, keeping well hydrated, resting well, eating good food, staying on the vitamin, that and supplements that you feel like are helpful for you and your family. Pulse electromagnetic fields, vastly important. We know we change blood vessels. We know we change how they heal themselves. We know they change how the stress of the vessel exists. We know that we can change the way that the blood patterning exists. So if we can fortify the vascular system itself, then potentially you may change that.
Yeah.
Across the board, that inflammation, irritation process across the board. So,
yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. And so it's not a bad thing that you're doing, Elaine. It's very beneficial to do that with the kids, to try to just make sure they stay healthy. We should all do that.
Yeah, I think it's just now, I think that it's really important for parents, because you don't know. And specifically where I am, it's harder to get tests if you don't have any pre-existing conditions. I know some places are different. Like, you're not going to know if this is your child or not. So if you have access to a MagnaWave, if you have access to PMF, use it consistently on your children, use it on yourself. This is the absolute time when you need it. Because I feel like right now, when we have a health crisis like this, we're scared and we don't know what to do. And that's where this could be such a valuable tool, because you're fighting off from that ever starting. You're not even letting, if somebody beats COVID and they continue to do these things, you're allowing their body the best chance to fight it.
Right. And that, I think, is the key. Again, we don't have medicine to make this virus better. We don't have a treatment program. We will not have a vaccine through the end of this year. Likely, if everything moves perfectly and we bend a few of the rules for regulations, we may have it in the early spring of next year. But then the question is, how much of it will we actually have, and how it will be distributed? Like, you can't make 6 billion doses of it, even once you know it works. It's going to take time to the availability of it. So in the meantime, your best decision is to keep as healthy as you can. And in the children population, this coronavirus tends to look just like a common cold. And how many common colds do you see your kid have? How much?
4 every year, 4 or 5 a year, constantly.
Yeah. Super normal. And this coronavirus will look exactly the same as every other common cold pattern that your child has ever had. So how do you know it's this virus versus just some other random little, rhinovirus or whatever that they're exposed to? So it's challenging to tell it apart. And I think that's what's caught everyone a little off guard in the pediatric population, is we kind of sat back and went, oh, we're not seeing the same type of impact factor as a lot of the elderly are, or the people who have comorbidities are. We can maybe breathe a little bit better, because we're always prepared in the pediatric world to anticipate our very young, or just like in the older population, are chronically ill, to have these similar problems. And we just weren't seeing it. And so everyone was like, this is crazy. But now I guess we just needed to wait long enough in order to see this sort of process occur, and again, this virus is teaching us something new every week, it seems. So it's got an evolution pattern. We still don't know exactly where it's taking us or what to do about it yet.
So we have a question, Dr. Myers. It says there has been talk about strokes in some COVID positive adults. Yes. And then they go on to say, is this how it might present itself in children? I don't necessarily see strokes in children, but certainly, what about strokes in adults?
We do see some strokes in adults, and that's one of the things that we are learning, is that this virus the lung problem this virus is creating, the reason people are having harder times breathing, needing oxygen, needing to be intubated and in critical care settings, we don't think it's because the tissue itself is becoming thick or irritated and inflamed. We actually, that's part of the picture. But the other, maybe bigger part of it is that the blood vessels themselves are clotting and having problems. And that is what we call a stroke. It's when blood thickens, it doesn't move smoothly through the vascular structure. So it's sort of like getting a clog in your drain. You know, is that clog still thick enough and big enough that it obstructs flow so your sink doesn't drain as quickly, but it still drains? Or is it one that's just going to stop flow altogether? And strokes work like that. So if we clot an area, can we still get blood flow around it and have the tissue past the clot survive? Or does it totally obstruct that space and that tissue then does not get oxygen and then begins to deteriorate and then become a cell structure that ruptures, and we see the impact factor of that, whatever that area is that's not getting blood flow. And if that's in brain tissue, then we start to speak differently, we start to move differently, we begin to paralyze different components of the body, arms, legs, faces, that type of thing. So, you know, and we are seeing that happen, and we're seeing it also not just in the elderly, but in, shockingly and scarily, in some of the younger 20, 30, 40 age ranges as well. And we don't know why. And that's, I think, what makes this virus still so, from a medical provider perspective, frightening. It's not that we can't predict some of this sort of averages. We can predict a lot of the averages, the means of this thing. It's the variance that we can't predict, the randomness of some of the impact factors.
So actually, it's kind of like a quadruple ROLU that occurs in the blood, causing it to clot easily and thicken and not flow properly, which would be a reason to use MagnaWave is to keep the blood flow moving smoothly through the body, or anything else that someone can do to improve their blood flow and blood circulation.
Yeah, because as cells become damaged or infected, they begin to change their polarity. And red blood cells specifically, if they don't keep a negative charge around the surface of the cell itself, then they begin to stick together. We want them to work like magnets that have opposite ends. We want them to kind of bounce off of each other all the time. But if their polarity changes, they stick together. And then all of a sudden you get clump, 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 clump. Then this big mass that then can't fit through a narrow tunnel.
So this is amazing, because I get this question a lot. When that is happening, does PEMF change the polarity of a cell?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so, but it'll change it, like, could it change it to the wrong polarity? How does that work?
It won't change it to the wrong polarity, because the magnetics it's just the way the magnetic field is structured. So it will begin to take and orient sort of the positive and the negative charges. It's just physics. Like, I don't know how to, we could get into quantums, but and field and string theory, but I think it may deep dive a little bit. But it doesn't change incorrectly. Like, that's not the way we're set up. We are on a planet that has a gravitational field. Our planet orbits very specifically in our sort of sphere. We're not willy-nilly. We don't just like ping pong around. We are in a very specific and unique orientation that we're spinning in. Our planet itself spins in a very unique way. So the poles they're permanent for right now. Now, there's some chatter and theories that maybe we're going to flip our poles, but that has not happened yet. So right now we have a North Pole, we have a South Pole. Our Earth spins on those. And then our Earth gravitates around our sun and our moons because of the way that we're held into space. And that doesn't change. And our cells don't change. So if you expose your cells to the magnetic field, it will be the correct field, because that's what we're creating. Because in pulsed electromagnetic therapies, we're utilizing our Schumann resonance. That is our field. That's what we create. And so there's no way that we're going to incorrectly polarize something.
Yeah, I think there's some misunderstanding. People think that, oh, what is the polarity of your machine? And I try to explain to them, it's not, there aren't magnets in there that are positive or negative. It's about the magnetic field, and that's hard for people.
Correct.
We did get a question. Does a personal oximeter at home help in monitoring health? I know how to say that word, but I cannot say it right now. But one of the things that goes on your fingers that monitor, is that what we're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, you can buy a commercial pulse oximeter.
Also,
And a lot of
thank you.
Walgreens and CVS's and pharmacies, Kroger's, or wherever you are, you can buy them. And they do. They're a little clip that commonly it just fits right on top of your finger, and it is reading through an infrared beam what the oxygenation is in your fingertip, and that's usually where they want you to place them. You can put them on earlobes, you can put them on toes, you can put it on your nose, all kinds of places for it to go. If your hand is cold, if you have poor vascular, some sort of disease process that changes blood flow, you may not get an accurate number, but they're commonly pretty decently accurate. And, we like you in the 90s. We don't really care where you are in the 90s because in that sense, you're oxygenating well. You can't get better than 100. So we don't like you to be in the 80s. That tends to say we're having a problem. If you drop into the 70s, we get interested. If you drop into the 60s, we're going to start intubating you. So those are kind of rough numbers of normal and not normal deals. And the only reason that it might be interesting is if you are sick with COVID and you begin to have that tight, short of breath feeling in your chest, you feel like you're not moving your air well enough. It may help you decide when did you want to go to a facility and get help. That would be the reason you would want that. But if you can take a deep breath and blow it out, and you can do that 10 times in a row, or you can sing a chorus of your favorite song, or you can talk in a full, complete sentence, then those are probably indicators that you're still breathing well enough. But there's a point where that will change. And the question is, how comfortable are you with where your breathing pattern is?
So I go get an oximeter, I MagnaWave myself, and then I'm going to see the differences. Would that be something you could actually see through something like that, like quickly, or would it take time?
I mean, you would change quickly, but most of us, if you don't have a lung pathology, your oxygen is like 95, 98%, and it changes more based on your breathing pattern. So if I take a really good deep breath, my oxygen will go up to 100. If I breathe quiet and shallow, my oxygen will drift down into like 94, 93 kind of age. If I'm just sitting on my couch watching television and I don't move for 10 minutes, it's going to drift down. But if I get up and I walk to my kitchen, it's going to go up. Like these numbers fluctuate dramatically based on what we're doing from a deep or shallow breathing pattern and how fast we're doing it. So you're going to see those changes more based on what you do, almost if you're a healthy person. Now, if you're a sick person that has more of a challenging problem, a pneumonia or something that's going on, then those numbers don't fluctuate quite as dramatically. They'll be a little more sick. And so we watch them carefully in the hospital when you're sick because we need to know that you're staying in a range that's acceptable. So
because you're not getting up and running around the house, you're laying in the bed.
Exactly. No, you're not. Exactly. Right.
Yeah. So to answer your question, Janet, she asked about having one of those at home. Like, yes, it would be helpful if you do get sick. But otherwise, monitoring that, it's not going to determine whether you're getting sick or not getting sick. You would know way in advance if you were getting sick.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
We have another question, Aaron. I'm sure someone asked it of Aaron. Speaking of blood clots, is it okay to MagnaWave a person who has an existing blood clot?
So
I have some thoughts there as well, but go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time, if you have an existing blood clot, you're going to be on a blood thinner management protocol. You're going to be taking a medicine in order to help dissolve that clot. And the research that's been done in PEMF will tell you that treating it with a magnetic field will help dissolve that clot faster. Because you are changing polarity, because you're changing cell structures, that will occur. I think the concern on any level at any point when you have a blood clot is, will you chunk a piece of that clot off that doesn't totally dissolve, that stays a little clot, and will that clot move someplace else? And would it ever then get to a small enough vascular structure where it would then get stuck and act like a new clot in that space? And so, I think that the risk is there because you've got the clot already. So, but dissolving the clot as quickly as you can would be a good decision. And so combining treatment with MagnaWave would be reasonable, provided you've talked to your doctor about that.
Yeah, under the doctor's care.
Yeah, it's got to be under your doctor has to know you're doing it. They have to be able to talk with you about it and decide whether they feel comfortable or not with that.
Yeah.
We know
you can't even run, right? I mean, there's restrictions when you have a blood clot, like you're not even supposed to run or walk long distances and do stuff without, the express permission of your doctor. So, I mean, I think that makes sense. Don't you, Dad?
Well, and it comes down, we've had this conversation a million times over the years, because somebody always says the next question that they would make to Dr. Amanda would be, well, I've got blood clots on my leg and they're there. They're stationary, they're there, and the doc knows they're there. Can I treat? And I think going along with what she's saying, if they're going to allow you to go out and walk and maybe even jog, if you've got those clots, they're not concerned about them going anywhere. Now, my recommendation has always been, don't treat that space on their leg, treat their low back or treat their ankle or whatever they're doing. But again, always make sure that the doctor's involved with the conversation and what's going on. But that's where it always goes, because I have a good friend that's got that, Phil in Evansville. He's got some clots in his leg and they're just there. And so he's always been somewhat worried about, he's on thinners as well, but they're just, I guess you'd say they're stuck. And so he's allowed to do things.
Yeah, I try to keep it that if any time somebody asks me, if you're not supposed to run or walk, if you're not supposed to be doing exercise, then you really shouldn't be MagnaWaving, because I think in that instance, that's something, unless your doctor tells you to, because I don't know, and even Dr. Myers, you wouldn't know what situation they were in. I mean, if you're not supposed to be running or walking, then you shouldn't use any type of pulse electromagnetic fields. But if you are able to freely do those things, and most of the time it's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, blood clots are always interesting, and they're common in the lower legs, but they can occur almost anywhere. So, again, engaging your physician and just saying, we're talking about doing this as a modality. Are you comfortable with me adding this in? Because we know the clot is present. We know we're going to dissolve it with the medicine. We know part of it's going to probably chunk off and move someplace else. So we're taking that risk, which is why they don't want you to be really active, because it may cause a piece of that to dislodge and move. That's why they don't want you to be active while they're trying to thin this thing down and solve it. So, but anytime you add a new therapy into your world that you're currently under supervision from a physician for another reason, you should talk to them about it. I don't care what it is. PEMF, I don't care if you add vitamins. I don't care if you start adding a food group. There are so many ways that our world interacts with medicine that it's always smart to engage your physician to say, hey, look, I'm adding this in. Do you think that's a problem or not a problem?
Yep. I agree. I completely agree. Again, if you have any question, please put them in the comment box. We would be happy to answer them for you. With COVID-19, what are you seeing in the hospitals right now? What is it like for you at work? We see a lot of stuff on the news where it's, crazy, and that they're not getting the PPE. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, I mean, the PPE has been a big concern. And part of it has just been a shift in our thought about some of the products that we have been using. There's certainly been a shortage. Everyone is concerned about it. Every hospital that I go to is counting the numbers of products that they have: face masks, face shields, goggles, gowns, the things that we're trying to be able to utilize. And they're all trying, every hospital is trying to decide, do we have enough to continue to protect the staff for the volume of patient base that we have right now? And potentially, as we reopen and we begin to do some of our elective processes again, could we sustain that as well? And so it's a numbers game right now that everybody is sort of paying focused attention to. And in places that weren't overwhelmed, we've been able to steadily have available to us these products. In places like New York, where it was just such a huge peak of incidents all at one time, those places were running out of what they needed to help protect their workers. And so I feel like, it's been a huge concern, and particularly for someone on the front line. I know I'm in the faces of patients who are COVID positive. I don't want to bring that back home to my family or to the people that I quarantine with when I am not at work. So, it's raised a level of stress for, I think, all of us in the healthcare profession. We've added layer after layer after layer of things to protect ourselves as we go to work. So every time I'm going in and out of a patient room, there's a whole process of getting ready to get into the room, and then how do you decontaminate after you've been in the patient's room. So, there's just a lot of tension, I think, from that perspective on how to stay healthy, how to create your own personal structure or strategy to keep safe. And for many reasons, not just for my own personal health, but because I don't want to get the next patient that I see, connected to the patient I saw before, that I don't want to take that home as well. So I think all of us are kind of dealing with it in our own ways. I think a lot of us have extended our own personal sort of care because we need to in these sort of stressful times. So it's been challenging, I think.
No, I understand. Ted, do you have any questions for Dr.
How do you, and of course, this is all over the board. I saw a video just earlier this afternoon, a woman from Texas, a doctor from Texas, talking about the different medications and so forth. But the opening up, there's this big fear that if we open up, we're going to allow it to spread even more or even faster. And then they start talking about the infection rates and the death rates, how much that will change, even if they're saying there's a lot more people infected than we have any clue to begin with anyway. Right. Where are your thoughts on that?
I mean, so we have created a test that can tell us decently accurately whether you are positive or negative for this virus, right? That was our first step. We have 330 million people in the United States. We've done 6 million tests. So we are not even testing 10% of our population at this point in the game. We've heavily tested in population areas that are sick currently, like New York. We've tested 1 million people. There, 1/6 of our testing have been in that location itself, period. And so when we try to guess how many people have had this or not, we have no idea. So the real question right now is how many people have already had this, have survived through this, and have antibodies to it now. And so the big push currently has been antibody testing. Could I get blood from you in order to tell me whether you've been exposed to the virus, whether you're actively sick with it right now but not symptomatic, or you are symptomatic, one of the two, or have you seen it in the past and you're recovered from it and have immunity for it? But again, that's a test that will take time to develop accurately. There were like 30 or 40 actually about 50 products on the market. 25 of them have been pulled off because they were not claiming correctly what they could do. So we're struggling getting a good antibody test that would be something that will help us know what's going on. And in the medical field, we're concerned because we know if we reopen, the only reason our curve flattened, the only reason that we didn't overwhelm our entire medical system, just like we overwhelmed New York, was because everyone stayed home and isolated. That's it. That's the only reason. So if we reopen and everybody goes back to the movie theater and the restaurant and to the hair salon and runs around in big groups, we will see more people sick, period. We will. And the question is, how many of them will die? And we are actively in conversation across America right now of kind of what's that acceptable number of death. We know this is a pandemic. We know it isn't gone. We know we're going to continue to struggle with it. We know it will likely come back this next winter. We are not done with this at all by any stretch of the imagination. So how many people are we okay letting die because we all go back out and do our worlds? And from a medical professional's, viewpoint, we're worried because we've seen what this does personal, up close. We see people die daily, whereas a lot of people in the United States have not even seen someone sick. And so this is just a very different, sort of approach. The economy is important. It has to run. Like I get the balance of what's going on in this conversation. It's not like we can just ignore where we are from a financials perspective. The government is handing out money to lots and lots of entities to try to bridge through this process, which is, certainly valuable and important. The question is just, if we get back together, how many people will get sick? How many of them will have a problem? How many of that problem group will actually die? And we don't know. We think it's going to look a lot like it has in this first wave before we self-isolated. And those were big numbers, 80,000 dead. That's a lot of people. Are we okay with that? I mean, that's the question that everyone is struggling with.
Okay.
We are okay with a number of every year from the flu that we deal with.
Exactly.
But we have to come to that understanding. Were you going to read the question, Elaine?
Yeah, well, I do. And I want to add to that. I mean, yeah, we understand the number from the flu, but we're adding 80,000 deaths on top of the number of people that died from the flu. So we are doubling the amount of deaths in the United States from sickness and in the world. So it's not just, it adds a totally different component there. LTC MagnaWave Services asks, one of the contradictory arguments is that immunity comes from exposure. How does that factor in with COVID?
Right. And that's the counter argument, right? If we don't get back out, if we don't reopen, if we don't re-expose, how do we build what everyone is talking about, herd immunity? How do we get to where we are with the flu, right? That's why we're okay with the flu. The flu, we've all seen year after year after year, whether you get sick or not get sick or sick on a level that matters, we're all exposed to it. And so our bodies are building a level of intelligence about the virus itself, and is capable of helping our bodies sustain and survive through any sort of infection that we get on the average, right? So when we look at how many die from the flu versus how many are dying from COVID, those numbers are very different. The percents are very different. And the reason we've got different patterns with flu is because we've seen it multiple seasons in a row, number one. And number two, we vaccinate against it. So we're getting a passive immunity from protective vaccines versus an active immunity when you're exposed personally. So the combination of active and passive immunity creates a sustainable sort of level of, yes, we are okay continuing to do everything we do normally, no matter what is going on with the flu outbreak at that time. We just don't know what this COVID-19 virus is going to do because no one's seen it before. We're going to have a higher incidence of death. Next winter, if we see this again, and I think we will, that incidence will probably be smaller, but we're still going to see heavy numbers of mortality from it until we get an immunization pattern that helps protect us passively, until we see this season after season after season and build active immunity against it. This is going to be a continued conversation because our death toll will be high.
So it's not like we can just open up at 30, like everything's back to normal and all these people get sick and die and then we're all going to be fine. Herd immunity doesn't work like that. It takes multiple seasons is basically what you're saying.
Correct. And it is the same every season. So even with the flu, we are concerned about people who have multiple medical problems. We're concerned about the very young. We're concerned about the very old. They're the ones who end up succumbing to the flu every single season. Yeah. So, and we feel like, again, COVID fits that pattern. We just haven't seen enough of it to be strong enough to fight against it. And the real question is the flu shifts a little bit every year. It's evolving. The virus is changing. And so we have to build a different vaccine every single season. It's not the same entity. And what we don't know is whether COVID's going to do the same thing. Is it going to stay a static virus without changing any of its surface components, any of the proteins or the sort of expressed things that are on the surface of this virus? We don't think that's going to happen. We think it's going to behave a whole lot like the other viruses that we see, and it's going to shapeshift a little bit every year. And that's why just this season isn't going to be enough. We're going to have multiple seasons of exposures before we're going to be protected in a herd immunity fashion.
Larry makes a comment. It says it should be up to the individual. I'm sure that's about going out and how they protect themselves or so forth. And I just wanted to make a comment to that. One of the issues with COVID as opposed to the flu is with the flu, you got typically a 2 to 5 day incubation period. And so I'm exposed. I get sick pretty quick. So I know I'm sick. I stay in. But with COVID, you're talking a 5 to 14 day incubation period. So I could be walking around for 14 days. That's where the 14 number comes from, exposing people before I get sick to where I stay in. That's a challenge. And that's where we need to be protective of other people that we could, in fact, be carriers and not know it.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's where the mask conversation fits in. If you will wear a mask in public to help prevent spread of your talking, particulate matter that comes out, coughs or sneezes, if you can not wipe your face and then touch something else that someone else may come into contact with and touch, the spread is where we're trying to maybe mitigate. And we're going to say, yes, if you're going to reopen areas, wear masks. Yes, if we reopen areas, continue to do that minimum of a 6 feet difference, of distance between you and the next person in order to be just conscientious of if you do have that exposure and are unaware of it, to not spread further into other people from that perspective. So, a lot of the strategies that are being employed right now are restaurants opening at 25%. So they're distancing tables that are being seated, movie theaters that are changing spacing in the seating that is being offered, so we can mitigate some of these things just by social distancing on a reasonable way, but we've got to stay focused on that. I think some of the fear is that people get out there and like, oh yeah, it's like normal. I can just do whatever I want, and not wear the mask and not social distance. And then I feel like from a medical professional's perspective, that's what we're worried about. If you don't continue to do your personal individual part, how many people will get sick, and out of that sick, how many people will actually have a problem and potentially not survive?
Tracy asked a question, and this was talked about. I want to try to clarify this a little bit. Earlier in the quarantine time, there were some stories and reports that the coronavirus virus that we have in Kentucky is a little different than what's going on in New York because it's mutating. And if it does continue to mutate, how do they come up with a reliable vaccine? But from where you are today, Dr. Amanda, do you see it mutated in various markets, or is it pretty much the same?
So we know the virus is mutating, and it's mutated into two kind of really distinct strains, one of which is more virulent, and so that means that it's more contagious, so it's more easily spread, in a way that the virus has become smarter about how to enter the host cell and begin its replication process. And that's the tricky part. That's where the vaccines become so very complicated, is that trying to find a stable component on the surface of the virus that does not change or changes so minimally that we can still target it. And that's where, there's like 100 different groups looking at viral processes. I think there are 8 of them that are right now in clinical trials. And that's a very rapid and early sort of process on a virus that we know is still evolving. So the virus in New York versus the virus in, small rural town somewhere else is probably a little bit different. Clinically, it will not be different. Clinically, it's not going to behave a ton different in you. Your symptoms are going to look exactly like those symptoms that are happening in New York City. So that the part of the virus that is actually creating the symptoms is still going to look very similar. The differences in those proteins and those mutations are, how do we target it? How do we get a medicine that works against it? And how do we develop a vaccine that's stable?
So what you just said, if I can get it right, is that the problem part of the virus is pretty much the same. How it gets into your body may vary. So to find the vaccination that fights the problem part can be pretty universal. Is that correct?
Yes. So, if you've seen any of the graphics on, the web or so forth, they've got a ball that has little spikes or little pieces that stick off of the surface of the ball, right? So we're looking at the surface structure of this vaccine, or the virus, in order to create a vaccine. And what I need is a stable piece that stays on the surface of that virus that doesn't change. I don't need it to look like my index finger one day and my pinky finger the next day and then my thumb on the third day. Like, that's not what I want. What I want is something that doesn't shift, doesn't change. It stays just like my index finger the entire time that I'm looking at it. That's how we create a vaccine. I target this one thing. I don't target everything else on the surface. But if this thing shrinks a little bit, that's different, right? If it starts to look like my thumb instead, now it's different and I can't target it anymore. If it starts to look like my pinky finger, totally different thing. Like, they're similar, but they're different. So if I target a surface space like that and that surface space shifts, now my vaccine is ineffective.
So that's like flu A and flu B, correct?
So a little bit, yeah. So the flu viruses have 2 different proteins on the surface, and we are targeting those proteins every season in order to make our vaccines. And we trend the entire Southern Hemisphere's flu season to find the 3 most prevalent flus, and that's what we make our vaccine against. And what we're hoping is that by the time it flips up to us in the United States in our wintertime in the Northern Hemisphere, we hope that it hasn't shapeshifted. We hope that it hasn't decided to, cut its hair off and be bald, or to grow a goatee, or to gain 15 pounds.
Get a beard like Pat.
Or instead of wearing contacts, we wear glasses now. Like, we don't want to change this thing enough that all of a sudden we can't recognize it. That's the problem. And so every season, our flu vaccine is variably effective depending on how much the virus has changed by the time it shifts from the Southern Hemisphere up to the Northern Hemisphere. So wow. We're dealing with the same situation with this virus. It is changing. We know it's changing. We're watching that trend change. What we need to know is what isn't changing on the surface as we've moved forward, and can we target it, and will it stay stable? And the problem is we have like 4 months of experience with this thing, which is evolving. So finding a stable structure on the protein surface is challenging. Thinking that it's going to be stable through January or February, when we might have a vaccine developed that we can then mass produce and then provide to everyone in the summer, which is the likely story, next fall, expecting this virus to not change that much in 18 months. That's the big trick, right? So that's the challenge of developing a vaccine, and a vaccine that's effective.
So basically, go on, Dad.
No, go ahead.
So basically what you're saying is that you just need to stay healthy. We all need to stay as healthy as absolute possible, because even if you get it right now, let's say you get it and then you get better, or you had it, you get tested and you've had it, or you have what, the proper immunity, then you could still get it again in 2 years. You could still get it again in 3 years. You could still get it in 6 months. So the important thing is, even if you've had it, it's not over for you. Like, you're never going to get it again.
Well,
so you need to change.
Yeah, Larry makes the comment.
Okay, yeah.
Larry makes the comment that, we get flu shots and we still get another form of flu, or we can go a year and still and have had a shot and still catch this virus because it's changing. That is correct. But we just, defense is better than no defense.
Yeah.
And moving forward, I mean, I'm in my household, we've had occasions where Debbie and I get our flu shots. More times than not, she's gotten a flu shot and gotten sick.
Yeah.
Then where I get a flu shot and it hasn't affected me. So that's always an option, no matter what. And I guess that's a chance we take, and people are going to make that decision, and we understand.
Right. And that's the difference in your own physicality, right? So if your body is engaged or has a memory that's a little bit stronger than someone else's memory, then you, like Pat, you're not getting sick. Whereas Dee Dee, who may have a different pattern of immunization in her system, a different memory sort of core in her body, then this may be a new thing for her, and she might get sick. And that's the variance, and that's what worries us about this coronavirus, is the variance. The mean we can kind of predict, right? The averages we can predict. But those outliers, why are these particular subset of kids getting this problem? Why are we finding stroke in 20 and 30-year-olds when the average 20 and 30-year-old is recovering without a problem at all? What is the difference in the person who has high blood pressure, and diabetes, but never has a problem with this, and the person who ends up on the intubation cycle and then dies?
Yeah.
The variance is what is the value of where we are, and the scariness of where we are.
Now, is it blood type? I've heard a lot of talk about blood type. Like, could that matter? Have you heard anything about that in your, where you're working, where certain blood types have a different experience with this?
I mean, blood types are always an interesting conversation because it's about protein in your body, right? Our blood cells are covered with specific proteins or not covered. Like the O blood type has no protein on its surface. The A has an A protein, the B has a B protein. And then there are lots of other subcategories of things on the cell surfaces that make us type them into specific categories. And the blood conversation is always intriguing because, food groups specifically, are you taking a type of protein that interacts well with your body protein as a good food, or does it negatively impact you as a bad food? Why is it that one diet does not work for everyone? It's always a fascinating conversation and question. There's a good conversation with immunizations of whether or not specific blood types interact poorly with immunizations versus others that seem to do fine for that. What we don't know is whether or not this virus it behaves differently with a blood type specifically. We don't know that yet.
Okay.
But is it part of the deal? Probably. It's a possibility because our physiology matters, and our physiology is what predicts our health on many levels. Why is this killing more men than women? Same numbers of men and women getting sick, but more men die. Why?
Women are stronger. I could just answer. I can just answer that question right now. I mean, we have children. We're stronger. I'm sorry. It's just the truth. It's just.
It could be the truth. So there's a lot of interest, though. Like in our chromosomes, specifically at a core. Do 2X chromosomes, the female group, give you a better protection factor? Is it the androgen that the Y chromosome creates that makes you a male? Is too much androgen a problem? There's a really interesting study in Italy about men with prostate cancer, and they have treated some men with androgen suppression or decreasing their androgen levels in order to treat their prostate cancer. Those men got sick, fewer of them became sick, and fewer of them died than the men that weren't having androgen suppression for the treatments with COVID. So is it androgen suppression that matters? Or is it that we need estrogen? There's a study group in Seattle right now that's putting on an estrogen like a birth control patch that you can put on a skin surface. And does the estrogen protect you from, the actual COVID virus? So it's a very interesting conversation that we don't have answers to yet.
So you see, here's the answer. Larry says women are stronger. Elaine says women are stronger. And that's why I'm protected right now, because I'm sitting between two very fine women.
Yay.
Yeah, Dee Dee's there too. And we know that she's
here. She's protecting me from the back.
Yeah.
Love it. You're surrounded.
That's right.
Again, if you have any questions, we're going to wrap up here shortly. So if you have any questions, please put them in the comment box. Do you have anything that you want to add, Dad?
No, I'm good. I think it's one other thing that I was going to say, and Dr. Amanda touched on it. And of course, we talk about it a lot with MagnaWave PEMF when you talk about the muscle memory and the cellular memory, and people wrestle with that our cells actually have memory of what's been going on in the area where they are, and they react accordingly. Just as an example, and then I'll let Dr. Amanda respond. With an animal, if you treat it and it feels better, but when it starts to walk, it remembers in its cells that it's sore. And so it will walk sore for a period of time till all of a sudden the cells say, I'm not sore, I'm okay. So then they can use their muscles appropriately and the soreness basically disappears. And so, but cellular memory is something that a lot of folks struggle with, but yet it's something that's here. And I'm guessing what you're talking about, Dr. Amanda, is that quite often your cells, your immune system, your cells are thinking they're weak and something gets in and they allow it to take over, or that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So our body does create a memory, and it's sort of like what we do. If I wear glasses, when I lay down, I put my glasses, I take them off and I put them in the same location. And so when I wake up, I pick them up and I put them on. If I change the location of my glasses, though, how many days does it take me to not reach over and try to find my glasses in their old location, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pattern, it's a habit. And all of our cells are built that way. So sick cells do take a recovery period in order to, honestly release that phenomenon of patterning that they were in previously. And they will feel a little bit sore, and they will, as that edema decreases because they work better, or that irritation decreases because they're working better, then that resolves over that time frame. And we always say that if you do a pulse electromagnetic treatment, that you're going to feel a detoxing, right? You're going to have a period of time where your cells actually are getting rid of the things that were stacked up and couldn't be processed because it was too toxic to be processed. You're going to phase through that until you get into normal function. And then your body is going to maintain that normal function across the time. And you have a memory of the bad, but it dissolves. And then you move into a normal functioning pattern from that perspective. So, yeah,
that's interesting.
Everywhere. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that we see that a lot. People don't realize the detox effect is actually a good thing, where I talk to people and they're like, oh, I got sick, or I had diarrhea, or my stomach hurt for a minute. And I'm like, yeah, that means it's working. That means that what's happening to you is working. It's not going to happen to everybody, but if it does happen to you, and I think that's the power behind being educated in this, and you're using a magnetic field, you're using PMF or MagnaWave, and you know how to tell somebody before a wellness session what's happening, that this may be something that they see, they're gonna address the experience totally different.
I think that's critical for people to talk about in front of it, because it's not always that you're going to have a dumping of some kind, like a diarrhea or a sweat or a redness on the skin surface. Our skin surface is actually one of the major places that we detox, which is why it's so critical what you're putting on your skin, exposing your skin to sunlight. Those types of things are incredibly valuable for your body processing across the board. But talking about it, because it's not always that you're going to find that dumping scenario going on. But a lot of people are just tired. Like all of a sudden there's this weight, that the stress level, sort of a process on the cellular level that's being minimized. And your body just goes, man, I've got to rest. Like I need to actively change where I am. And our healing phase, our recovery phase for our body is during sleep. So, don't be you're going to feel better after your treatments commonly, but don't go run around and do 99,000 things on your list. Just rest, like do something meditative and mindful, or nap, whatever that is for you. Hydrate well, because your body is supposed to be 80% water at a minimum. And none of us are probably there for that. So even though if we drink water all day long, our chemistry is constantly dissolving the water that we require. So you've got to maintain good hydration. And sometimes if you're a practitioner, it's as simple as saying, these are the things we expect afterwards. You're going to be a little tired. You may have some little discomfort while your body gets rid of the stuff that it's been not being able to handle because it wasn't prepared to handle it yet. It wasn't supported in a way that it could handle it yet. So you may feel cranky or sore, or you may have some dumping, sweating, flushing, that type of stuff. And drink water. Here's a water right now. Drink one while we're doing this.
Yeah.
And water's cheap. I mean, you can get it anywhere for low cash points. So yeah, at least I think still. So it's not one of the hoarded items. I don't believe it right now. So, but just reminding, your client that that's sort of the process that will happen. I mean, I know when I MagnaWave, after, changing my circadian rhythm twice in a week and flipping from a day pattern to a night pattern and then back again, I MagnaWave and I'm exhausted, so I rest, but I rest really well and I recover so much faster after I do that.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So,
There we go.
Yeah, I think it's important too to know how you're going to react, because after that first treatment, some people have more energy and some people have less energy. And some people, depending on where you are, you might have more energy the first time and then you get a treatment a few months later and you have less energy because of where your body is at that moment. So I think that's important to just know that it's working. So this is great information. Does anybody have anything else you want to close with?
We have a question here on CastBox. How many liters of water a man should drink once a day, or how many liters of water should a person drink once a day?
We, as a rough estimate, I would say that if you weighed yourself on a scale, that's how many ounces a day you should drink. And that's a person that's not super active. So if I weigh 120 pounds on the scale, I need 120 ounces to maintain normal physiology. But if I'm going to go jog, or if I am running around with my kids and chasing them, or I've got something that I do at work that's active, I lift boxes and move things a lot, then commonly we're looking at time and a half that or double that, depending on what your real activity level is. And if that activity is outdoor, where you're going to experience a heat factor that is different than an inside sort of climate controlled space. So,
Wow. So you should drink your weight
in ounces
once or twice a day.
You should drink, so if I weighed 120 pounds, 120 ounces through the day, right? And if you think about that, if you pick your average water bottle size, or, the classic adage in medicine has been, 6 8-ounce glasses or 8 6-ounce glasses of water a day, right? So, which is a rough and loose term. To me, I feel like it's maybe a little bit more appropriate to weight base it. Because we all weigh a little bit differently. If I asked a guy to drink that might be less than he needed if he is 6'2" and 200 pounds versus, somebody who is 5'5" and 98 pounds, so adjusting it based on your body mass is valuable. So a loose estimate, rough estimate, a target for your day, your body weight in ounces through the day period. And don't drink it all at one time. You'll just dump it. Your kidney will be like, whoa, way too much water. And you'll end up in the bathroom for hours. So spread it out fairly evenly. So
Maria thought it was half of your weight in ounces. And I'm sure there are people that say that, but it's a good rule of thumb. It's very easy to say whatever your weight is, drink that much throughout the day.
Or try to, at least. I mean, that's
too much.
Trying to give my kids water is my heart. My son, and he continues to go to the sink and chug water. Like, I'm like, if you're chugging water, Carson, you are already dehydrated. Like, you should not be like, I have, and Stephanie can attest to this, and Chris can attest to this. I have bought them so many water bottles. It is insane. And to get them to continuously drink them is my problem. Yeah. But I have noticed the more that I do MagnaWave them, he seems to feel better and he drinks more water. I think it's also helped me with calming him down a little bit in school, because I've noticed I'm a teacher and a president of a company, and it is a lot. And so what I've realized is that keeping him focused and calm and drinking his water is so important at the age of 9. And so I've been treating him in the morning, where I usually treat him in the evening. I've been treating him in the morning, and it's really been amazing to me to see the difference in his behavior throughout the day.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, thirst it's a warning mechanism. It is, it's kind of like your gas tank light coming on. You have like 3 gallons, don't go very far, like find a gas station and get gas. That is thirst for our body system. We are low, we're depleted low. You need to do something about it right now. So, and a lot of us drink thirsty and we don't think about it, right? Or we are thirsty and we eat instead. So we're not sort of maintaining an appropriate level of water in the body in and of itself. And all of the chemistry in the body, every single mechanism requires a water component to really work effectively. It's a cooling down process for the body itself, but it's involved in so many of our chemistry reactions that it's just, you can burn through water faster than I think anyone really realizes. And as you hydrate well enough, you begin to feel so much better.
Yeah.
As your chemistry is not acidic, as your chemistry becomes more alkaline, your thought processes change. So the whole body works more efficiently and effectively. You're calmer. It's cleaner. Your focus changes. Like the whole thing sets up differently.
Yeah, I sit him down in the morning. I give him a treatment, and he drinks his water and has his breakfast, and I let him finish his whole glass of water. And I feel like, I don't know this, I'm not telling him, but I put the water bottle there while they're doing schoolwork, and he is instinctively just drinking more water after getting the MagnaWave in the morning, and his behavior is better. So I like switch the pattern. I'm gonna just put the 2-year-old on it in the morning too, to maybe calm her down as well.
Right. Do what you got to do. That's awesome.
There you go. That's why I do it 4 times a day.
Ah.
Yeah, calm down. Calm down.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
No, I think we're good, done.
I think we are too.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. We will do this again in 2 weeks. We don't know the exact time and date because we try to do them every 2 weeks. But, Dr. Myers, thank you so much. She's traveling. She's working different shifts. So this is going to vary during, all of this going on. But, follow us at MagnaWave PMF on Facebook and Instagram. And then also MagnaWavePMF.com to see when the next wellness webinar will be. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Dr. Amanda, thank you.
Yes. Bye, you guys. Good to talk with you.
Bye-bye.